I know what you're thinking. What's this doing here? People love it, right? Or anyway, a handful of critics did. It's been called a masterpiece and it topped year and decade-end lists. Its style has even come to be folded into modern filmmaking in a few sly ways.
The shotgun would ignite, and LMA would scream. But Robert Ford would only lay on the floor and look at the ceiling, the light going out of his eyes, before he could find the right words. You're dying, but you don't know it. In the final stages, the victim breathes only once or twice a minute. A state of suspended animation.
Not bad for a movie essentially buried at sea by its distributor. It was delayed for 2 years after wrapping before a negligible art house run made back less than half its budget. It had its fair share of detractors. The Hollywood Reporter, the LA Times, the New York Post, the New York Times, and the Chicago Reader, among others, came to the same conclusion. Too long, too boring. It was cheated of an Oscar for cinematography, and its director's cut may never see the light of day. Indeed, its director, Andrew Dominik, seems to distance himself from it a little more every year. At a revival screening of the film a few years back, he demurred on the subject of alternate cuts of the movie. He said, "That would be like talking about dead kids. They were great. Now they're gone." Maybe this film doesn't need me, but I don't mind confessing that I need it. With every year since I first saw it, in my living room as I live too far from any theater showing it, the film has grown in importance to me. Its cast is littered with gifted performers at the height of their power and luminousness. Its score, by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, is a classic in its own right.
And he stole from the rich, and he gave to the poor. He had a hand, and a heart, and a brain.
With apologies to Terrence Malick, whose style Dominik occasionally co-opts without mercy, it's the most visually beautiful movie of the last 30 years. Many of cinematographer Roger Deakins' images were shot with lenses made specifically for the film. The result is somewhere between a tintype
Has laid Jesse James is grave.
and an oil painting.
It was Robert Ford, that dirty little coward. I wonder how does he feel?
The tableau perfectly mirrors a world defined by eroding mental stability and counterfeit masculinity. A way of life is ending, and so the film encases its doomed dreamers in amber for an ice age which will turn Jesse James into legend, and his violent crimes into righteous adventuring. That revision is a huge part of why the film continues to beguile me. The faces on screen tell one story, their words another, and the facts of their fate still another. Those are related by the passages of the source novel by Ron Hansen, read in a sticky monotone by Hugh Ross. All this hints at the chief fixation of the film, the way our mind creates meaning when life refuses to give it to us. Robert Ford is in one sense nothing more than a confused and besotted acolyte, but squint, and his study of Jesse James comes to look journalistic.
Bob would rarely vouchsafe his opinions as they talked. If spoken to, he would fidget and grin. If Jesse palavered with another person, Bob secretaried their dialogue, getting each inflection, reading every gesture and tick, as if he wanted to compose a biography of the outlaw, or as if he were preparing an impersonation.
Privileged with the company of the hero he worshipped as a boy, he now takes great pains to observe everything there is to see about the man whose outlaw figure has been supplanted by one of flesh and bone, made weary through years of having his story told by strangers.
Oh, you know what I got right next to my bed? Is The Train Robbers, or Story of the James Boys by R.W. Stevens. Many's the night I stayed up with my eyes open and my mouth open, just reading about your escapades in the Wide Awake Library. They're all lies, you know. Of course they are.
In his absence, Ford's life will become a never-ending regurgitation of his time with Jesse James, or, if you prefer, a review, one that garners more than a few negative comments. Despite being a sumptuous banquet for the eyes, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford is consumed by words and performance.
You talk good. You can hide things in vocabulary.
The reason Ford's account of James's time is so crucial is because the nation had been fed a steady diet of advance word about the man, but so few had been in his presence.
You might want to keep that.
Ford's pantomime brings everyone closer to the man who cast a shadow over an entire country. Like this movie, Jesse James only managed to appear in front of a very small audience. The rest of the world had to hear about him from news clippings, or the odd words from his mouth that made it into print.
Jesse James sent me a telegram last month saying he'd kill me if he had to wreck a train to do it. He said once I got in his hands, he'd cut my heart out and eat it in strips like it was bacon. I'll wreck his train first.
Jesse James's life was a movie the nation was desperate to keep watching and talking about, even after he died. It's okay if you don't buy the idea that this movie is about film criticism. It's okay if you choose to view it as one in a long line of eccentric, acidic films about the death of the Old West and the ugly contradictions inherent in nostalgia. I submit mine to you because last month I turned 26, and I finally really know what it feels like to not be able to connect to the events of your childhood. I make no great claims for my adulthood, my maturity, or improvements in my reasoning power. I still see the same pattern of bad judgments I made in my youth crop up time and again. This movie taught me to accept the good things I've done for myself, and try to let old habits go when they rear their head. I just know that I now look upward into a register of years that seemed impossibly foreign to me a few weeks ago. And if there is any movie that makes literal the killing of your former self and the acceptance of your permanent self, it's this. Robert Ford spends the whole movie pursuing adulthood, and when it's finally thrust on him, he sees how lonely it can be. His gang all goes to jail or dies, and he's left with just his memories of the man he worshipped above all else.
You know what I expected? Applause. I was only 20 years old then. I couldn't see how it would look to people. I was surprised by what happened. They didn't applaud.
He was ashamed of his boasting, his pretensions of courage and ruthlessness. He was sorry about his cold-bloodedness, his dispassion, his inability to express what he now believed was the case. That he truly regretted killing Jesse. That he missed the man as much as anybody, and wished his murder hadn't been necessary.
Life gives you many opportunities to discover your humanity, to live joyously and on your own terms, to make mistakes you look forward to regretting. Robert Ford and Jesse James both fail to accept these terms, and their inability to see the big picture keeps them small, scared. It makes their faces, their words, and their fate align.
I was the baby. I was the one they made promises to that they never kept. And ever since I can remember it, Jesse James has been as big as a tree. I'm prepared for this, Jim. I want to accomplish it. I know I won't get this one opportunity, and you can bet your life I'm not going to spoil it.
And as desperately sad as this film can be, I'd put its likeness on currency. It's made my life make a little more sense at a time when so little seems to.
Sounds like an adventure.
For the Yankee Nation, I just don't give a damn. I'm glad I fought against her. I only wish we'd won. I ain't asked any pardon for anything I done. I hates the Yankee Nation.